How much is too much for a gaming mouse? $100? $200? How about I hit you with that hot tree fiddy for the Zaunkoenig M2K, the world's lightest gaming mouse. Pasta for dinner it is this month. The Zaunkoenig M2K is a love letter to mice. It's designed and handmade in Germany by two brothers, Dominic and Patrick, with a dream of proving to the world it's not the size that matters, it's what you do with it that counts. The M2K is the fruit of their labour, taking the crown for the lightest gaming mouse at just 24 grams. From the moment it arrived in a discreet, stamped package, you could tell that this product was going to be nothing like anything else in the peripheral space. Inside the storage tin you get a compliment card with product information on it and the dummy PCB that shows just how much engineering went into creating it. Unboxing really does feel like a premium experience, and unlike other brands which bundle in accessories for value, Zaunkoenig prioritised simplicity and clean design. This approach is obvious when you look at the mouse. If Batman wasn't such a filthy wired Mad Catz Chad, this is absolutely the mouse that he'd be using. At first glance it'd be fair to think there wasn't much going on with this mouse, but every inch of the M2K has been designed with one purpose in mind, and that is performance at the lightest possible weight. It's packed with impressive features too. It has a carbon fibre shell, a 3360 sensor with a custom MCU allowing 8000 Hz pole rate, Japanese on-runs for all switches with 0 milliseconds debounce time, a ceramic coated wheel and high quality PTFE skates which feel on par with Hyperglides or core pads. Using the mouse, the first thing I noticed was how the shape was unusual and distinctive. Going in I expected the mouse to be comparable with the G-Wolves HSK, with them both being fingertip micro mice, but in hand it was a very different experience. The click height on the M2K is incredibly low and there isn't really any hump to speak of. I actually found my grip was more relaxed, flatter and far closer to the Xtrfy MZ1, which is another mouse designed for fingertip grip. The M2K kind of feels like a wider, more nimble MZ1 without all the junk in the trunk. This flat shape and small dimensions made the mouse extremely versatile in terms of where and how I applied my fingertip grip. I could relax, arch, tilt, move my fingers backward and forward down the body with no impact to control or usability. The sandblasted carbon fibre shell also took a little bit of getting used to. The mouse was porous and textured and felt less like a plastic mouse and more like something natural. Best comparison I can think of the organic texture almost is the childhood memory of holding a paddle pop ice cream stick. Consistent with everything so far, the clicks felt distinctive and unlike other mice. The Japanese Omron are light, full and muted, offering more of a pop than a click. This subtle, easy to spam click is also shipped for 0 milliseconds debounce time. I'm told that this, coupled with the 8000 Hz polling rate, gives some of the lowest click latency possible on a mouse. So if you do miss your shot, and believe me, I miss a lot of mine, it won't be down to your click latency. Instead, you can consider trying some of the totally non-toxic techniques of blaming your teammates, blaming lag, or indeed, rage quitting altogether. The ceramic wheel is another innovation that I'd like to see adopted by the wider industry, with it offering more grip and less weight than rubber without the deterioration. The last feature to comment on is whether or not the 8000 Hz pole rate had any impact in game for someone like me with all the raw aim talent of Stevie Wonder. I'd like to say 8000 Hz was a come to Jesus hallelujah moment, but in all honesty it is unlikely to have any impact on your game outside of maybe some confidence placebo, and it certainly didn't have any impact on mine. I did some blind testing switching back and forth between 1000 and 8000 Hz pole rate and found that it had no impact on my AimLab scores or gameplay, and I couldn't tell the difference. This kind of leads on nicely to how I felt the mouse was to use in game, and it's a bit of a mixed bag. Whilst the M2K absolutely is the lightest mouse on paper, unless you're repeatedly switching backwards and forwards, after a few minutes of gameplay you really can't notice much difference between the M2K, the HSK, or even something well balanced and light like the Logitech G Pro X Superlight. As your run-of-the-mill average player, I didn't notice any improvement in my game using the M2K versus another premium flagship mouse. Admittedly, this could just be my Stormtrooper aim, but I would have thought moving to a 24 gram mouse would have had some impact on my aim, certainly if weight and aim do have a correlation. I also tested the M2K across a variety of surfaces: hard pads, cloth pads, control pads, speed pads. Being so light, I expected it to perform at its best on slower cloth pads where I could keep a little bit of control, but this mouse is at its best when it's zooming. So there are some absolutely awesome things about this mouse, no doubt, and in certain situations it's kind of the best at what it does. Unfortunately, there are also some major compromises that stop the M2K from being the best all the time. The first and arguably most visible of these compromises is the lack of side buttons. There is an argument to be made that true fingertip players don't need or shouldn't be using side buttons, but as someone who's fingertipped almost every mouse that they've used, I've always used side buttons and never had a problem doing so. The lack of side buttons made daily driving this a bit of a chore on desktop, and I cannot tell you how many times I have jammed my thumb repeatedly into its smug carbon fibre side, trying desperately to back up out of a web page. Even as a casual Overwatch scrub, I typically use mouse 5 for melee. I instead tried binding melee to the scroll wheel click, but this also wasn't satisfying or natural to use. Lastly, and probably most impactful to my experience with the M2K, is the rubber cable that it ships with. It's about as flexible as rubber can be, but that's kind of like saying that Piers Morgan is about as culturally sensitive as he can be. Zaunkoenig intentionally went with this rubber cable because they believed that a paracord would increase drag on the mousepad, and unfortunately it's fitted in such a way that aftermarket paracording would be very challenging on this mouse. It's a shame for mice that are hand assembled by the brothers that there isn't at least the option for a paracord on a mouse that you're spending $350 for. And that price is probably the last compromise on this mouse, for want of a better word. If you're going to sell a mouse for a price that most of the community would have to do unspeakable things on OnlyFans to afford, then it really should be a boutique experience in my opinion. If you are selling the supercar of gaming mice with the price tag to show for it, then where is the supercar experience? If you were to buy a Lamborghini or any supercar for that matter, you can configure it exactly how you want it. The engine, the paint job and livery, the wheels, the brake calipers, the trims, the finish, even down to matching accent seatbelts. You might ask why any of this matters, because it's only going to be the short, balding gentleman coping in the driver's seat that notices. But that's kind of the point. They've bought that car and configured it exactly how they wanted it, not because they needed it a certain way, but because they wanted it a certain way, and because they were happy to pay the premium to have it that way. And that is kind of how I feel the M2K should have been. I can't say that anyone needs to spend $350 on a gaming mouse, but if they do, I'd imagine that they should be able to get it exactly how they want it to be. Don't like the switches? We have several to choose from. Encoder wheel too stiff? Let's try some other options. Don't want the rubber cord? How about a paracord? Which colour would you like, sir? We have lots of options. The high price tag should be the cost of entry for your dream endgame fingertip mouse. There is no one that could reasonably say that the M2K is not a spectacular mouse. And even with the concessions and limitations of its config, it's still arguably a dream mouse. Unfortunately, in the case of the M2K, it's someone else's dream mouse that you're being asked to buy, and not necessarily your own. So hopefully that's given you a good look at the Zaunkoenig M2K. If you want to know more, leave a comment. I'll be active and answering as many as I can. I've been Gary, this has been Get Reviews, and remember, if it's not good enough, I'll keep you informed. So get subscribed and I'll catch you in the next.